All right, welcome to Halitics. It is Friday. It's a free-for-all, so of course you should call me if you want to talk about any of the topics that I address or something altogether different if I'm live Friday, noon to 1 Eastern time, pretty much like clockwork, unless maybe I take a week, take a day off, maybe take a week off, whatever. But that's rare. That's rare. I'm pretty much here, I'd say 51 days of the 50 weeks of the year, 50 Fridays. Maybe there's a couple I miss, and maybe it's more than two. I don't know. It depends on the year. But anyway, I'm live today, the 29th day of September 25 of August 25. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. And one thing I noticed, I've used a new, well, it's an older version, actually. It's a public domain version. I try to use everything public domain I can. I don't want any complaints about copyright. It's not right to do that. So the latest audio I've been using for quite a long time now, that version of Fur Elise is, as I understand it, public domain. There have been no complaints, nothing. Nobody's taken nothing. So I'm glad. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. What we try to do here is have not step on other people's corns. That's an important aspect of Halitics. But at the same time, bringing you the news, letting you know what's happening in the world, what we believe is important, and how to perhaps make sense of things and try to make things just a little bit better. One place where things are not good, they're terrible indeed, is Gaza, is Palestine. Israel's relentless campaign against the Palestinian people is absolutely reaching its final solution in Gaza with starvation taking more and more lives, as well as American bombs dropped by Israelis, American bullets shot by Israelis, American missiles launched by Israelis. So 63,000 plus now dead. 5 more Palestinians died of starvation in Gaza. And one point was made to me that when you read Israeli communiques, Israeli press releases, Israeli military statements, I don't believe they ever use the word Palestine or Palestinian. They only say Gazans because they reject the idea. They claim there's no such thing as Palestinian people. It is erasure, right? It's just pretending that there's no such thing. And this is obviously part of their genocidal campaign to eliminate and eradicate an entire group of people, millions of people from the face of the earth. It's cruelty on a scale, frankly, that I have not seen in my lifetime, as far as I'm aware. And, I don't remember the Kissinger-Nixon bombing of Cambodia. I understand up to 3 million people were killed. Certainly Abu Ghraib, where we tortured people, was remarkably cruel, sadistic, the complete denial by the W administration. But I think this goes beyond that. This is at another level. Maybe the Cambodia campaign, is comparable. It's horrific. I wish I didn't have to talk about it, but I have no choice. I feel morally compelled to discuss it. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this unless I get calls, but just a little bit more on what's happening now in Gaza. We have our square where I just kind of give you the numbers laid out in red on a white field since October 7th, Israel and the United States, 2023, that is. The U.S. and Israel have killed a minimum of 63,025 Gazans. That's the number in Anadolu Ajansi this today, and that's another 59 from on top of yesterday's count. And we have over 11,175 Gazans killed by Trump and Netanyahu, with over 5,500 women and children, because the numbers consistently reflect over half the deaths are women and children, many old men, seniors, young babies, children. We mentioned the children. So it's as bad as it can be, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. You hear the most inane and horrific excuses, people like Bill Maher saying, well, if they really wanted to kill them all, they'd kill them all. That's what they're doing. You immoral monster. That's what they're doing. Here's somebody that, and we're going to get into really the, the rationality of voters. What you hear from a lot of Democrats, they just cannot understand. They just keep going back to that same old saw. Well, I don't understand. How could people vote for Trump? How could people vote for Trump? He's so bad. He's so awful. He's so this, the grab your pussy, and this, everything he does. What they continually refuse to accept is, and I point this out every time, and it doesn't register. Elections are choices. If your choices are bad, then you're going to make a bad choice. Right? I mean, if you don't have a good choice, whatever you choose is going to be bad. So you can't condemn somebody for choosing Trump if the alternative is as bad or almost as bad, or from their perspective, arguably and rationally worse. Now, I'm not totally taking voters off the hook from either party, right? Because you can make the same excuse. Well, I voted for Kamala, even though she never renounced the American-Israeli genocide, never said she would do anything, never called it that, never said she would stop it, never said she would take action against Israel. But I still voted for her. I'm not going to condemn you for that, because what was the alternative? Trump. But here's where you're not off the hook, where you don't have a pass. Because the problem, if there are two really terrible candidates, is that you can say, well, I get a hall pass because I get to vote for evil because my choices are evil or evil. But they weren't. You actually had a decent choice in that election. Jill Stein. You could have voted for somebody good. And if you didn't, then no, you don't get a pass. You don't get any more blame for what's happening now if you voted for Harris versus voting for Trump, because they're both so awful. But you don't get a pass either because you didn't vote for Trump if you vote for Harris. Or you don't get a pass if you vote for Trump, and with the argument, well, I had no choice. The alternative was Harris. No passes because there was a good choice. Jill Stein was a good choice. Dr. Stein was a good choice. In 2016, you don't really get a pass if you voted for Hillary in the general, especially if you didn't vote for Bernie in the primary. You had a good choice in 2016. You had a couple of times when you had a good choice. So I'm not giving people passes, but I'm also saying that you don't get to be sanctimonious and self-righteous and arrogant if you voted for Harris because the alternative was Trump. And likewise, you don't get to be self-righteous and sanctimonious and holier than thou if you voted for Trump because the alternative was Harris, because there were other alternatives. Just to make it clear how bad the Harris-Biden ticket was. And I'm conflating them, and I'll tell you why. Because Harris never once explained or distanced herself in even the most minute way from Biden. And not only did she choose not to say, well, I would do this differently, such as I would not support Israel's genocide. Not only did she refuse to identify areas of disagreement with Biden, she also actually took credit for the most evil things Biden was doing, the endless war with Russia, the deadly war, the costly war with Russia, as well as the genocide. Saying, well, I was in the room when the decisions were being made. Jacob Lew, former Biden ambassador to Israel. The current ambassador is awful, right? It's this Huckabee. I think he refers to Palestine as Amalek. I think he's done that. That's like a biblical kingdom that God, Jehovah, supposedly told the Israelites they could just kill every Amalekite. So Huckabee is that bad that he actually relies I mean, he uses a biblical, you'll have to keep from crying, he uses a biblical name to refer to Palestine because that supposedly, purportedly provides some kind of God justification from God to kill them. But how much better is Jacob Lew, former Biden ambassador to Israel? This was Monarez providing this, but from the New Yorker, and I share this on Facebook, by the way. This is how bad the Biden administration was. So Jacob Lew is being interviewed in the New Yorker, which, by the way, has been hardly some champion of, human rights and opposition to genocide. They've hardly been the greatest they're out there. I mean, no traditional media has been, but they do interview Lew about what Israel's doing about the genocide, and this is what Lew said when he justified killing children. He said, in many cases, the children, this is in green that Mondo Weiss highlighted, and then I highlighted my own in yellow. In many cases, the children killed were children of Hamas fighters, not children taking cover in places. So I don't know how he knows they weren't taking cover, but supposedly, because remember, the Israelis use this daddy's home program software that the drones follow, which when a target, a so-called Hamas terrorist target, comes home, they sense when they're going to a house or an apartment. That's when the drone actually fires into the terrorist location. The alleged, I shouldn't say the alleged terrorist, the alleged Hamas militants' home or location, the quote daddy's home unquote software, then it uses its AI, whatever, to attack at that moment. So they will maximize the fatalities. They'll maximize the casualties and get the entire family of the possibly Hamas member. And the reason for this, I suppose, is that, well, if we kill the Hamas militant and they have sons, daughters, wives, spouses, whatever they have, they're going to be mad. They're going to hate Israel. They're going to want to kill us. So we'll kill them first, even if they're 3 years old, 5 years old, a baby. We'll kill them anyway. That's the justification for using these killing techniques, these murder techniques. And Jacob Lew defends it. He says it's okay. Well, in many cases, the children were of Hamas fighters. And the interviewer's like, what? What kind of soulless, inhumane thing did you just say? What did you just say? Well, in many cases, the original number of casualties. No, who were the children? You're saying they were often the children of the fighters. And they're like, well, then maybe it's a legitimate military target. These are the inhuman monsters that infested the Biden administration, just as the Trump has inhuman monsters. So I can't condemn people who said, I will not vote for Harris. I have a problem if you voted for Trump. But likewise, I would not condemn anyone who says, well, I can't vote for Trump. I have a problem if you voted for Harris. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me on this. 240-242-5646. I got a comment. One of my Facebook friends, and remember, I don't identify people. I don't dox. I don't know what the word is. If you want to call in and take ownership of something that I quote you on, there'll be some if it's a public page or whatever, it's a public figure. But I got this relatively long response to my point, which I made several times, is that Democrats lost in 24 and they are losing elections. They're incredibly unpopular, in part because they have adopted an incredibly unpopular position, with a few exceptions, but even then, those exceptions aren't very strong or aren't very notable, where they support genocide. And so I got a response from a friend, a Facebook friend, a real friend, actually. Genocide is one reason Dems lose, but there are others. I agree with that. They become associated with a white-collar professional class that looks down on working-class folks. No question, that's true. And people feel that. They understand that there's disdain for them. But then there's this statement: voters don't really vote based on policy. Thus, even if Dem policies are more beneficial to workers, they still feel the palpable disdain the Dem elect and candidates feel for them. All right. First of all, I want to just say, I think that statement, voters don't really vote based on policy, is condescending. I mean, it really is. You're saying that other people, I presume the people who say that themselves, believe they vote on policy, but other people don't. I see this all the time from a guy who posts. I had him on the old radio program a number of times. We used to get into it pretty hot and heavy. And they're saying this all the time. Oh, it's all about messaging. Oh, it's all about, the emotional connection with the voter. Voters don't vote based on policy. That statement, I believe, is condescending. I think it doesn't suggest. It says that the people in this country, citizens, don't really think about what's best for them. They don't really make decisions based on the evidence, reality. And I don't agree with that. I don't believe that at all. The argument is often, well, what you see here. Thus, if Dem policies are more beneficial to workers, voters would vote for Democrats. Right? The assumption underlying this statement is Democratic policies are better for workers. I don't buy that. I don't accept that. I think there are certainly times when you can look at elections and say people made bad choices and they may regret them, they may not. But I'm not going to make assumptions that voters necessarily don't know what's best for them. There are voters who couldn't care less about the homeless. I think that's wrong. I wish they did. But that doesn't mean that they're not voting based on policy. They don't care about the homeless. They don't want us to spend money on homeless people. Now, I think there are irrational decisions made. People make, decisions that clearly are harmful to our country. But again, elections are choices, and if you have two bad choices, it seems to me it's not quote rational unquote to blame somebody for choosing one bad candidate instead of another bad candidate. But the idea that Dem policies are more beneficial to workers is an underlying assumption. It's a premise that Democrats consistently fall back on, Democratic voters, and many who aren't even progressives routinely fall back on, well, as maybe Democrats are bad, how you point out several examples, this, maybe Obama should have done that, and maybe Hillary shouldn't have said that. But in the end, voters were stupid not to vote for them. They're still better. Well, I reject that. And I explain why. And I've said this many times. I don't see that. It's far from clear, in my opinion, that Democratic policies are better for workers. I think it's really important for Democrats, and especially, lawmakers, electeds, to not to fall into that trap. Because, and we hear this all the time, the basic assumption is, well, if Trump proposes it, if Republicans support something, it must be bad. And that's serves that has a really useful function. If you're a billionaire, if you're a backer of the Democratic Party, and you don't want the Democratic Party to adopt worker-friendly policies, any worker-friendly policies, any policies that benefit that hurt you. If you're a billionaire, if you're an employer, if you're an offshorer, you don't want tariffs. Tariffs will cost you money. And so you demonize Trump. You say everything Trump does, everything Trump says is bad. Trump's for tariffs, ergo, they're bad. If Trump's for anything, it's bad. Therefore, Dem policies must be better for workers. But that's not clear. And if you look at Obamacare now, Medicare for all is better for workers, 100% better. But Obamacare isn't necessarily better. Yes, some people who didn't have health insurance have it. And that's good. That's true. But there are a lot of costs. Obamacare does incentivize companies to limit employee hours. If you're below that 25-hour limit per week, then you're not, as a matter of law, entitled to Obamacare from your employer. So the way Obamacare was written, the way it was passed, it actually provides incentives to companies to keep worker hours low per week. Less overtime, not even a full week's salary. It means it means the gig economy explodes. You have 3 jobs, none of which provide you with health care. That's not good for workers. The free trade deals, I already said, those are devastating for workers. The endless war championed by Democrats has been devastating for the working class. They paid the highest price for those wars. Whatever you think about Trump's foreign policy, and I don't think much of it, but he has not sent troops, right? So to me, the basic premise that Dem policies are better for workers is flawed. That's why they lose. It's really important to understand that, because if you take the position that workers or voters aren't rational, then you are absolved from having to seek and promote and enact the best policies for workers, because they won't know the difference anyway. They aren't based on that. Now, here's a story from Iowa, Hawkeye State here. I used to say the nicknames. I'd always talk about the nicknames of the different states. I don't do that so much anymore for whatever reason. Who cares? I think this shows voters are rational. And this is a case where in a red district, apparently Trump won this district by about 11 points. Caitlin Dray, I believe it's Dray. By the way, I learned about this. This is updated 2 days ago. So this happened, Tuesday this week. And the election results, I guess, came down Wednesday. I learned about this from a Progressive Democrats of America call I sat in on yesterday for a little bit, and they were talking about this. And I didn't, I just kept my mouth shut. But I like to see what these democratic institutions are doing, what they're saying. That's kind of my part of my research for this program. And the moderator of the discussion, the host, I'm not sure if that's the right word, moderator, host, was taking a victory lap. Hey, look, we beat back the GOP in Iowa and took what had been a Republican seat in the Senate, there, the state Senate. And this is important because it breaks their supermajority. Now, I don't know anything about Caitlin Dray. I haven't read her. I don't know what her policies are. I don't know what the policies are of the person she was against. I don't know what was the uphill climb, the downhill climb, what have you. I think this shows, knowing nothing else, voters are rational. In Iowa, they're saying, Trump hasn't really done anything good for us. We're not really benefiting from Republicans much either. So we're going to try something else. We're going to try something different. Now we see this back and forth, the seesaw, right? You have midterms when generally the president's party loses votes. Well, this is rational because presidents consistently disappoint voters. They consistently don't do what they promise. They consistently betray poor, struggling, and working class voters. And as a result, those voters, they're like, rats in a cage. They don't know where to go. We don't know where to go. Wherever we go, we get the shock. We push the little button. We get a pellet one time. We get a shock the next. So we'll just keep going back and forth. That's not irrational. That's not irrational because you just don't know when you're going to get that pellet, which is rare from the political class, and when you're going to get the shock, which is frequent. But there's the recency bias. I voted for Trump, and things haven't gotten better. I voted for Trump, and we have chaos in government. We have probably, as far as we can tell, escalating debt. Unemployment does appear to be up. He promises tariffs. We don't get them. He promises peace. We don't get it. He says he's going to stop the genocide in Israel. It's gotten worse. So I voted for Trump. I got the shock. When I pushed the little button that said Republican, at first I thought I was going to get a pellet, but now I got a shock. Before that, I pressed the little button. I voted for Biden, and then I got a shock. So I go the other way. Well, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That's not irrational. This is a consequential victory. Democrat voters saying it's not working for us. The Republicans ain't working for us. Maybe we try something else. It makes sense. They'll probably get a shock. Now, to be fair to the Iowa Democrats, they don't even have they have a bare minority that's above the super minority, or the whatever, the opposite of a super majority, the barely above, totally relegated to nothing status. But what they need to do, you want to keep getting votes. You want the mouse voter to keep pressing its nose to vote for you rather than the Republican. Don't give them a shock. Be honest. Tell the truth. Say, this is what we're trying to do, but we can't do it without your support. And here's how we've tried to do it. But that's not what Democrats do. That's never what they do. And that's why they lose. All right. I thought this was an interesting story, so I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Again, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. Two high-powered women with very important, powerful positions are in the news because they've raised the ire of President Trump, Donald Trump. So Susan Monarez, it says Director, Centers for Disease Control. I put that. That's me. She's actually the former director. She just was replaced, or she's been fired. And Lisa Wood, still governor of Federal Reserve, still governor at the Federal Reserve Bank. Trump wants to get rid of her too, but he can't get rid of her. It's an interesting situation why one is protected and the other isn't. So I just want to discuss a little bit because I think maybe the media doesn't do as good a job as they could. A lot of folks are saying, well, good on. Well, I'm not. Maybe a lot of folks aren't saying it because I don't know anyone who says good on except for Thom Hartmann. But maybe Thom Hartmann is saying good on Susan Monarez for having refused to step down as director of the Centers for Disease Control, and good on Lisa Wood for refusing to step down as a governor on the board of the Federal Reserve. Well, one of them has a legal leg to stand on and the other doesn't. And that's why Lisa Wood, who does have that legal leg, remains in office, at least as far as I can tell. By the way, I forgot to tell you earlier. I'm going to tell you now. Please do subscribe now. Click the blue and white square in the bottom right of your screen as you're watching Halitics. I think if you're watching on a device, there's another place you can just click subscribe. Don't forget, and we're seeing the growth, which I love. Don't forget also Facebook, permanent or 24/7 dialogue there, back and forth on Facebook. Just type in Halitics in your search engine. It'll come right up. Love to have you there. And also we ask you to click like. I love the comments, getting a lot of comments, getting chat. That all really, really helps us beat the algorithm, as they say. So hope you'll figure out a way to interact with us. And I love the calls. I always say that, but any way that you show YouTube, Facebook, any social media that we're on, that you're enjoying Halitics, that you're watching Halitics, that you're invested in Halitics, that super helps us. Now, I will never ask you for money. That's not something I do here. Fortunately, I don't need to. But I do ask you to I do ask you to subscribe. All right, back to the two women, Monarez and Wood. Monarez gone from the Centers for Disease Control, which is an arm of the Health and Human Services Department of Health and Human Services. And you can see from the org chart, I put it up here. I just want to kind of, in case anyone was wondering, why Trump can fire Monarez. Now, Monarez said, well, I'm not going because Trump didn't fire me. I serve at the pleasure of the president, and he didn't fire me, so I ain't going. And you can see there's the org chart. I think this is courtesy of ABC News. Thank you, ABC News. On the left, right is from the Fed's website. So as you can see from that org chart, at the top, HHS is a federal agency. The Secretary of the Health and Human Services Agency is a cabinet member, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and then directly under him in the org chart are two women, Stephanie Spear, and she's kind of his principal deputy, so she acts in his place, in his stead, over everybody. And then there's more to CDC. There's more to Health and Human Services than just CDC, but also serving directly under Kennedy, not serving under Stephanie Spear, unless she acts as the secretary. When Spear's made the principal, when she's the acting HHS, I guess Monarez would have to report to her. But otherwise, Monarez reports only to Kennedy and then from Kennedy to Trump. And according to Monarez's lawyers, she doesn't even serve at Kennedy's leisure. She was hired by Trump. So really, Kennedy doesn't oversee her, according to her, or at least he didn't until she left. That was a misreading, as I understand it. Kennedy's the cabinet member, not Monarez. She can say, well, Trump has to fire me. But I think that's kind of putting, I don't know what the right word is, putting form over substance. Trump hired Kennedy to oversee the whole HHS. Kennedy says to Trump, I want to fire Monarez. He fires her. She insisted on hearing from the president. She said, I haven't heard from the president. Well, the president said, you're gone. Or at least the White House said it. Now, apparently, Trump hasn't issued an executive order yet. I'm not sure about that. But he will if Monarez tests him, and he has the right to do that. Now, I don't think he should. I think Monarez is right. Monarez is saying, hey, we've got a real problem with this secretary, meaning RFK Jr. He's anti-vax, he's anti-science. It's in the best interest of the American public to have widespread vaccinations. We want herd immunity. I think she's right. It seems clear she's right. I buy what the science is saying. But you know what? She ain't president. She ain't and I know some people would disagree with me and say, well, those vax were just, it's a profit center for Pfizer and Moderna. And maybe that's true, but it does seem, and this is really ultimately why we need single payer, universal health coverage. We need much higher taxes on the wealthy because the fact is, we don't really know. There's clearly a financial incentive to, there's benefits to the drug manufacturers to mandate that we have vaccinations. So there is a conflict of interest. It's true. There's really no way to avoid that conflict of interest, however. Unless, I guess, you could make those companies government agencies. That would probably pretty much eliminate it. I'm not sure I would support that. Seems like the Moderna and Pfizer and Merck, they do a good job making drugs. The problem there is that they charge ridiculously high prices for them. They have a government authorized monopoly, at least for a period of time, when no one else can sell the product. And they exploit that for all it's worth. And we all pay a huge price as a result. Yeah. single payer health coverage, negotiating with the drug companies, keeping their profits much, much lower, taxing the, obscenely high salaries of these for-profit healthcare executives would also go a really long way. Because even if you had single payer, you'd probably, I don't know if you would get the profit out of Merck and Pfizer, you get it out of the hospitals. You get it out of the private equity that runs them. And that's essential. We need that. But when it comes to making the drugs, maybe those companies still make a profit, but you tax their executives at very, very high rates. You have all manner of ways to reduce their incentive to cheat the government. And that's what we need to do. But that doesn't mean that they're not providing an essential product that we should use. And I don't know that I support mandates, but I definitely support a CDC that looks at the science and isn't biased by, whatever RFK Jr. is biased by, some sort of strange fantasy that he has, that there's somehow autism is caused by vaccines and they haven't saved millions and millions of lives. In any event, whether you agree or not, I don't like the firing of Susan Monarez. I like the fact that she stood up for her subordinates. She said, I'm not going to fire my 4 top staffers. They're really valuable. And they were fired anyway. I like what she's doing, but this is not ultimately an effective resistance, because Trump does have the power to terminate her services, and he did so. The effective resistance is for Democrats to champion science, but they can't really get out of their own way at this point, so I don't expect anything from Democrats. Lisa Cook, different story. Lisa Cook is a governor. She still is. She's independent. Look at her org chart on the right. She's a member of the board. Now, think of it this way. If it's a private corporation and there's a board, the president doesn't get to fire the president of a company. The CEO of the company doesn't get to fire the board members. The board members are elected by the shareholders. So Cook doesn't serve at the pleasure of the president. She serves a fixed term. She can be fired for cause only. And ultimately, the Board of Governors, I believe, determines whether there's cause. Trump's trumped up claim is that Cook violated her obligation to be truthful when filing for a mortgage. She apparently, according to Trump, according to some whistleblower who brought this to Trump's attention, apparently he's a MAGA. They want to get rid of her. The reason that Trump wants to get rid of Cook is very simple. Cook, Jerome Powell, the chair, and at least one other member, they have resisted Trump's call to lower interest rates. The economy remains relatively strong. Unemployment is relatively low at 4.2%. I understand there's underemployment. I understand people are working. There's also overemployment, people working 50, 60 hours a week just to get by. And compensation is way too low, of course. But in terms of actually the number of jobs, we don't necessarily have a jobless crisis at this time. And so Cook and Powell are saying, hey, we don't think it's the time to reduce interest rates. Reducing interest rates supercharges the economy. And we don't want that. We don't want a boom followed by a bust. Trump's like, I don't care about a bust. I want a boom now because I have midterms coming up next year, and I want to keep Congress, and I want to pass even more harmful legislation, laws that hurt the American people. Cook says no. Cook says, I don't care what you say. I don't serve you. My job is to make the best decision with respect to what interest rates should be. And I'm going to keep doing that. And sorry if you don't like it. So she can't be fired at this point. Now he's going to try, and there's going to be some kind of a trial even to determine if what Cook did when she supposedly, and I don't know if it's true, the allegation is that when she sought a mortgage on a vacation home, she claimed it was a primary residence. that is problematic. Primary residences do carry lower interest rates than vacation homes. The reason you pay less is because banks recognize that if you have only one home, or the home where you live, you have a home where you live and work, near that home or in that home, you're going to move heaven and earth not to default. You're going to do everything you possibly can to pay the mortgage every month, to pay whatever's due. And because of that very strong, because you don't want to get foreclosed, you don't want to lose your house where you live. Because of that incentive, the risk is much lower for the lender because they can count on the borrower doing everything. They'll borrow, they'll max out their credit card. They'll work an extra job. They'll do everything possible to stay in their home. They don't want their kids to be sleeping under a bridge or having to live in their in-laws' house. If it's a vacation home, you're like, well, it's too bad. I don't want to lose the home, but you know what? I don't really care that much about it. It was getting to be a pain to go over there. It's expensive. We'll let it go. Therefore, the interest rates are higher when you borrow on a second home. And if Cook was, in fact, claiming her vacation house was a primary residence, that's a problem. I don't know whether you should be fired for that, for lose your job as a member of the board of governors. Maybe there's a fine. I don't know. I don't like it, but I don't know that it happened either. So for now, Lisa Cook stays on the board of the Fed. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And you can see that even Trump gets it a little bit, and he doesn't ever like to be told no. But here's from NBC News. Trump administration will tap Jim O'Neill, a deputy health and human services secretary, to become acting head of the Centers for Disease Control after the firing of Director Monarez. That's not happening at the Fed. There's no new Fed nominee or acting Fed governor to replace Lisa Wood because she's still there. Because Trump understands, it sucks for him. He doesn't like it. No, he doesn't like to hear no, but he still can't just get rid of her. So that's the real difference between those two stories. The different results that we've seen so far, the different outcomes. I always, the premise of this program is not Democrats are good. The premise of this program is not Democrats are even better than Trump. The premise of this program is that we need something better and that both parties are terribly corrupt and that there's an understanding, I think, among more of my viewers, more of my consumers, there's a greater understanding that Trump is really, really bad as an existential threat. Then there's an understanding that the Democratic policies and the Democratic presidents of late have been posed existential threats to us. And I think in terms of just outright fascism, Trump is in a different ballpark, right? Maybe, or definitely, Biden, Harris were proto-fascists. They turned over, they offshored, they outsourced foreign policy to weapons manufacturers. We've been over this a million times. Palantir, which basically runs the government now, Palantir agent Avril Haines was the director of national intelligence under Biden. She was his pick. Palantir agent. Raytheon agent, board member of Raytheon, Lloyd Austin was the Secretary of Defense. And the Secretary of State was the board member from Boeing, or at least and that would be genocider Blinken, Anthony Blinken. So that's fascism, clearly. That's not ruled by the people, that's ruled by corporation. But it's more of a proto-fascist setup to a degree. Since they were actually chosen by Biden, we didn't have the kind of, thugs marching through our streets the way we do now. So, the basic assumption is, Trump's really bad, but there's also the assumption, and Democrats are bad, but there's also the assumption that Democrats can be reached, that together with enough evidence, with enough, not Democratic leaders, not Democratic elected, but Democratic voters, progressives can be reached and will understand that in the end, their best interests lie with a third party, fourth party, Green Party. I think that's true for Republicans too, by the way. I do. I absolutely do. I don't think there's any, look, I know Green Republican voters, but sometimes I think the priorities of Republican voters are different than that of Democrats. I don't see in Republican voters the same kind of, say, concern for immigrant, for human being, for their lives. So I do see Democratic voters, rank and file, sometimes more reachable. But sometimes Democrats fall for crazy stuff. So this was posted on Facebook. This is actually from Blue Sky. I don't know who Jessica Can is. I have no idea who they are. I don't know if they're trans. I don't know how they associate, how they identify. But this was posted with, I think, approval by a Facebook friend of mine who's very progressive, who's really almost exactly on the same page with me on almost every issue. But here we part company. I do not endorse this kind of language to describe the current situation vis-a-vis the Trump administration and trans people. It's not a genocide. A genocide is the deliberate systemic effort to kill people, to wipe them out, to eliminate them. We're not seeing that. Nobody's putting trans people in concentration camps or gulags or shooting them. That's not happening. Now, there's this idea, well, it's not that kind of a genocide, but they're erasing us as people. They're saying we don't exist. But again, no one's saying you don't exist. It's semantics. Well, they're saying we're not really trans, that trans isn't a thing. I haven't even heard that. I think what I have heard from the right is that children aren't born into the wrong bodies. They may say, well, if you think your body is the wrong body, if you think you should have a penis and you don't, then you have some problems, that you need help. You're mentally, you have some mental problems, mental health issues. And I don't think that's true. I don't agree with that conclusion. I think that there are people whose brains, gender and sex generally align, but sometimes those conceived male, they may have a female mind. I mean, I guess that's true. I don't know enough really, but I'm sure that seems right to me. I reject the notion that because you feel as though you're one sex that doesn't align with your body, I reject the notion that means you're mentally ill, that you're deeply disturbed. I reject that notion. But I think it's sad. I think it's unfortunate. I mean, I don't know how happy you can be if you feel like you should have a vagina and you don't. I get that. But that doesn't make you mentally ill. I think it makes you maybe more likely to be sad. And of course, people don't treat trans people very well. I mean, we always treat people who are different badly, although it seems like we've kind of gotten past that. But the idea that there's a trans genocide is just not true. It's false. And if you accept that framing, what you're doing is making it impossible or much more difficult. Well, first of all, you're diminishing what a genocide is. A genocide is what we're seeing in Gaza. Homes flattened. People starved. Everyone in villages wiped out. Entire families killed. That's genocide. Now, what does Jessica Can define genocide as? A government that removes every mention of a group of people, destroys information about them en masse, bans their discussion in schools, restricts their ability to travel, and starts seizing and refusing their official ID. Well, That sounds really strong, right? It almost does sound like a genocide if you're going to remove every mention. But they're not removing. I mean, maybe it's in government materials. You can go on YouTube and talk about trans people. I do it. There's social. This post is staying up on Blue Sky. Nobody's coming after Jessica Kaep for posting it. I don't believe there's every mention is being removed. I'm not sure what they're talking about. Destroys information. But even if all that were true, it still wouldn't amount to a genocide. It would be awful. We would need to fight it. It's not the same. Your life isn't threatened. Seizing and refusing official ID. So what Jessica Kaep there, I think, is referring to is that in the past, the government has allowed people to change their birth certificates to reflect their preferred gender rather than their sex. Sex is immutable. Whatever your sex is when you're conceived is what your sex is. You can't change it. I think that was a mistake. I think the government shouldn't have allowed people to change their official documentation. Your sex is your sex. It could say F, but you present as a male. Fine. So I have a real problem with this kind of language because it minimizes it. Because people say, well, if that's a genocide, then I guess what's happening to the Palestinian people isn't that big a deal, right? It's not that big a deal. Oh, well, their birth certificate doesn't say Palestinian or it just says Gaza, not Palestinian or Palestinian. So it's not great maybe, but it's hardly that awful. So there were comments, of course, I always have to jump in this. And one person wrote, it's actually a working class genocide thanks to our healthcare system. Well, again, these terms, genocide is a term. I use it a lot to describe what Israel's doing to the Palestinian people because it fits. It's true. That is what they're doing. They're trying, and they're not even hiding it. Israel is trying to wipe the Palestinian people off the face of the earth, or to the extent they're not, to move whoever remains from their killing sprees, from their pogroms, elsewhere. That is genocide. That's the textbook definition. There's no working class genocide in America. The working class is treated really badly, but there's no systemic effort to kill them, to relocate them. And I know there's a genocide happening and the victims are not trans people, they're Palestinians. Overly dramatic claims of victimhood make it tougher to unite to stop Israel and its U.S. accomplice. I don't know what could be clearer. It just seems so obvious. I don't know why some progressives feel the need to embrace this kind of identity politics, which really is absurd in the end. It doesn't comport with reality. And it's very, very counterproductive. It's very, very harmful. And we shouldn't do it. Just shouldn't do it. All right. I'm going to move on. I could talk a little bit more about this, but we're getting towards the end of the hour. I'm going to revisit this story. So I talked about this maybe a few weeks ago. I think it was the very beginning of August. Maybe it was after it must have been first full week I did in August after the 9th. I talked about how the Montgomery County Public Schools invited to speak to principals and vice principals. And I got you, Ari. I'll get to you in just one quick second. Just give me 1 second. But I wanted to just touch base on this story where the Montgomery County Public Schools invited former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, well known for taking a knee during the national anthem, to protest the mistreatment of African Americans by the police during the Black Lives Matter movement. And also Anurupa Galuli, I believe is her name, who is a software engineer who also does education work now. And so they spoke, and there was a real question: what are they getting paid? Their usual fees. Kaepernick's speaking fee can be ranges anywhere north of 50,000, and Galuli maybe a little less. But I speculated correctly, by the way, that they were not probably paid because, I thought they were there to sell software, which it turns out was apparently the case. So neither one got any money from the school, from taxpayer money, but both were flogging their product. And in a way, I have more of a problem with that. At least if you pay them money, that's one thing. Just give them a couple hundred, give them an honorarium, give them, even 10, 50,000 is way too much. But yeah, pay somebody something. But if the real issue is they're trying to sell, trying to sell, maybe, enter into a millions of dollars a year contract with the county, now we're talking real money. And that's where my concern really jumps in. So yeah, they didn't get paid, but look at this. Kaepernick discussed his new company, Lumi, according to social media posts. Lumi is a platform to empower creators by providing them with the tools. This is what they say. Of course, this comes from his website. Needed to independently create, publish, and merchandise their stories, both digitally and physically, through the use of AI. Ganguly also was not paid, and she also flogged software. I have a real problem with this. I think that, if anything, there's far too much software in our schools, far too much computerization of education, far too little hands-on, person-to-person, peer-to-peer pedagogy. So in a way, it's almost worse, because now Ganguly and Kaepernick are going to be like, hey, we gave you a free speech, now buy our software. All right, let's go to Ari. Hey, Ari, how are you today?
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday, and I admire anyone that knows old Greek words like pedagogy. So my respect to you. Okay, my question was really, if you can back up a little bit, because I was doing something and I missed the part that you talked about, the genocide relationship with the trans situation. I missed that. If you don't mind, I know you're going to call me stupid.
I just said real quick, I don't know if you want to comment or not. I just said I don't accept the use of the term genocide to describe the actions of the Trump administration vis-a-vis the trans community. I don't accept that it's anywhere near a genocide. I think that's just a total misabuse of the term, and I think it's very harmful to say it is.
Yes, I agree. I agree. What also this also brings back a little bit of, to me, back what brings to mind this conversation you're having is for many years, even way before all this happened, a couple of years when it started, the ongoing genocide war. I don't call it a war or a conflict. It's really a genocide. For years and years, I used to just kind of watch all these things about diversity, the trans, the gay movement, all of it, whether it's African American, all of that is great. That's what we stand for. But I always used to worry, it used to bug me that with all that said and all that action, all that energy that went to all those things, we were ignoring very important things like Palestine. While Palestine was really rotting and they had all the intifada, I know you like the word intifada, and it was going on way before all this began. And then you can take the same parallel with other conflicts around the world, whether it was Afghanistan, Iraq, even Bush admitted we're addicted to oil. I mean, all that stuff was going on, but the virtue signaling, before there was even that terminology or virtue signaling, patting ourselves on the shoulder, what a great democracy, and we stand for the beacon of democracy and human rights. All that was going on. All the energy was going into all these things, but ignoring, meanwhile, the foreign affairs, the international situation. That's really the only thing that you made me think about when you were making that connection of trans and the genocide. It's ridiculous that we stand for these great things and we ignore the atrocities that we inflict upon the world with just the military might that we possess. That's all I got for today, Hal. Thank you for what you're doing, and you have a great weekend. Enjoy a good Labor Day.
All right back at you, Ari. So glad you called. You have a great weekend as well. Great Labor Day. I will be doing a live show Monday, so I don't miss my appearances. Generally on holidays, it's only if I'm away, but if I'm home, I do the program, of course. Just real quick, so the response to me, I didn't write that, but this was the response to Hal Ginsberg. This is not Genocide Olympics here. More than one genocide can be in different stages at the same time. If you think you have to throw trans people under the bus to unite to stop the genocide in Palestine, then you're no ally at all. Get off the bus and what? Well, I didn't characterize myself as an ally. I'm not sure what that would mean to be an ally or not to be an ally, but it's not that I'm throwing anyone under a bus. The bottom line is there's no trans genocide. It's not in its early stages. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I think the Nazis did try to kill trans people. They did put gays in concentration camps. I'm not sure it was really a full-on gay genocide, because certainly there were gay German officers and Gestapo agents and the like. So I'm not really clear it was quite the same as the war on the Jews and the Gypsies, where the Nazis clearly were trying to wipe them all off the planet. And the way the Israelis are trying to just kill certainly everybody in Gaza, or completely clear that area out when there are a few remaining people. So it's definitely wasn't even clearly the same. I'd have to learn more about what happened in Germany with respect to lesbians, gays, trans and the like by BTA. But there just isn't a trans genocide. It just isn't happening. So it's not a question of throwing people on the bus. It's not saying, well, this isn't a popular issue. People aren't really sympathetic to trans people, so therefore we shouldn't defend them or protect them. That's not my argument. My argument is it's not a genocide. And I'd also note, yes, people don't support every aspect of what you would call the trans agenda, I suppose. And I don't. I'm very leery of treating children, minors, in ways that will have lasting impact, whether it's hormone blockers, puberty delay, any kind of surgical intervention. I got a problem with that. I mean, if the tissue is healthy, right? And people say, well, we do all sorts of things for people. We take out their appendixes when they're children, or appendices, whatever it is. I think it's appendixes, though. We take those out if they have a bad appendix. We'll take it out. So, if the child doesn't want to have a penis, we'll take that off too. Well, it's different because the appendix is diseased. The appendix is causing pain. It's not healthy. The penis is a healthy tissue. It's a healthy organ. It's just not a wanted organ. It's not the same thing. You don't remove an appendix that's healthy. You might if you're already in the neighborhood, if you're already inside the patient and there's something else going on. I mean, it's not necessary. It's an appendage. But it's not essential. But that's not true, obviously, for a sex organ. So it's not the same. I have mentioned I have issues with those conceived male competing against girls and women in sports because of the clear physical advantages that males enjoy over females when it comes to strength, speed, size, quickness, coordination. So that doesn't mean it's a genocide, and that doesn't mean I'm throwing you under the bus. It means we have different opinions. It doesn't mean I believe your life is any less valuable. So I think that's where there's a real serious difference of opinion. And yeah, it does cause problems because Trump was elected in part because he was able plausibly to define himself as a pro-woman, pro-girl candidate, at least when it comes to protecting the integrity of girls and women's athletics. All right, 240-242-5646 is the phone number. We're past the hour. I had a lot more. I wanted to talk a little bit about current affairs. I mentioned Nathan J. Robinson yesterday. He did an outstanding video, really condemning so many of the corrupt, amoral pundits, commentators who either minimize Israel's atrocities or outright deny them. He did an extraordinary job, did Nathan J. Robinson. I'm less of a fan today. He did a video with former, maybe she still is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten. And it was kind of a fawning interview. He was giving her an opportunity to promote her new book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. And I felt that he really was far too easy on her. He did ask her about her position on the Israeli genocide. She won't use the word. He didn't really hold her feet to the fire on that, which was kind of ironic because he was saying that we really should hold these commentators, these influencers, feet to the fire. I'm not going to play the clip. I have a clip, and I have another clip of her. Even more egregiously, in my view, Weingarten, very aggrandizing in her book. We're the ones who are fighting fascism. And I do think teachers are incredibly important. I married a teacher. I think teachers are wonderful. But Randy Weingarten is a union boss. And she promoted Hillary Clinton in 2016 for president over Bernie Sanders. As far as I know, they had no real vote. She just made a decision. The executive committee of the AFT made a top-down decision to endorse somebody whose policies have been fascist-friendly, a proto-fascist, much as we see from the Biden-Harris team. So I get if you're Nathan J. Robinson, you want to be friendly, you have somebody who's kind of a big name as your guest, Weingarten, she wants to promote her book. You agree with the basic premise of the book, which is that educators are crucial in the war against fascism. But the author is so flawed, is so compromised by her own actions, by her own relationships with people like Hillary Clinton and the deep state, if you want to use that term, the mic, maybe that's a better term, that she's just not the right person to be giving out this message unless she comes clean, unless she acknowledges, yes, I shouldn't have been so gung-ho for Hillary. Yes, I was compromised by the fact that I was a board member, right? And she was a member of the board of the Clinton Foundation of some sort. Almost certainly she was put there because she's influencer, because Hillary said, I can use her. I can use her in 2016. I can use the endorsement of AFT when I run for president. So let's put her on the board, eh, Bill? And I'm sure Randy said the same thing. Well, I'm going to get behind Hillary because she's got all this money and she's got this board of directors and I can be on it. Whereas I can't get anything from Bernie. So this is the interlocking corruption at the top of our country. These people, this club that poor, struggling, working people just ain't part of. That's why they're so angry. That's why they're so bitter. That's why they're turning against Democrats. They turn against Republicans too. They want something different, and they're right. Because what we have now just ain't working. All right. Thank you for being part of Halitics. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, please click like, please click subscribe, please comment. I'll be back Monday on Labor Day.